I'm going to give you a very simple 3-step process so that you can start to reprogram and repattern your mind. And I want you to understand this first. Whenever you have a thought, I always say that you can't control your first thought, but you can always control your second thought. And the reason why is because our first thought is the thought that comes from some sort of pattern or conditioning. And so something happens to you, you have an immediate thought that pops into your head. That is the first thought that is part of your conditioning. Something happens to you, a thought pops into your head. That is part of your conditioning. And so if you have a thought that comes in, whether that's a negative thought about somebody else, whether that's a negative thought about yourself, whether that's a negative thought about your life, whatever it is, victim mentality, you notice the thought, and then you say, is that the thought that I want to stay with, or do I want to change it? And I want you to understand this. We are all just a set of patterns. We as humans are just a set of patterns, AKA programs. And all of our patterns, almost all of our patterns, develop in our childhood. And some of them are good, and it's great to have those. And then some of them are bad, and some of them hold us back. And some of them are negative, and some of them are judgmental, and some of them are selfish. And so we have to become aware of the thoughts that we have. And it's great to have a child now, because I've been saying this type of stuff for years, but now I can look at my son. I remember not long ago I was looking at him, and my wife was talking to him, and he was staring at me, and I took my hand and I was looking at him, and he was looking at me, and I pointed to the left where my wife was. And I was trying to point to my wife, and he was just looking at me, wasn't looking over to my left to see my wife, because he didn't even have, he came with all of the hardware, but the software hasn't been installed. The program of when I do this with my hand and I point to the left, that means turn your head and look left, has not been installed. And so when you look at that, you can see even little teeny tiny things like that are programs. Little teeny tiny things like that are patterns that are built into us from childhood. And we can look at the patterns that we have, the good ones and the bad ones, and we can stay with the bad ones if we want, that come from our childhood, that come from our past, that come from when we were unconsciously just downloading everything that we possibly could. Or we can grow up as adults and say, I'm going to now make my own patterns. I'm going to get rid of the patterns that I no longer want, and I'm going to repattern. That's our decision. You can either decide that you want to keep them, or you can decide that you want to get rid of them and change them. And so I'm going to teach you a very simple, very, very simple formula to repattern and reprogram yourself. And it comes in an acronym. It's very simple. It's APR, okay? The A stands for awareness. I need to become aware now, in this moment, listening to this podcast episode, of the things that I want to change. And you can, as soon as we get done with this podcast episode, you can turn me off, and then you can just journal through it. What are the things that I want to change within myself?